I'd seen the changing of the guard maybe a dozen times over the years. You know how it is when you live in London, you avoid the tourist spots like they're a personal insult. But my nephew was visiting from Cardiff, and he'd never seen it. So there I was, on a Tuesday morning that felt more like November than April, standing on the pavement outside Buckingham Palace with a paper cup of tea that had gone cold 10 minutes after I bought it. The crowd was the usual mess. Americans in matching rain ponchos. A school group from Japan, all wearing the same blue caps. A few German backpackers arguing over a map. And me. And Leo, my nephew, who kept asking if the guards were allowed to blink. They're human, yeah, I said. They blink. But do they get to blink? I didn't have an answer for that. The atmosphere was thick in that way only royal occasions can be. Not loud, exactly, but humming. A low buzz of expectation. People checking their watches. Kids sitting on shoulders. The smell of roasted nuts from a cart 50 meters away, mixed with damp wool and that faint, grassy London smell after a light rain. Then, the band started up from somewhere down the mall. Distant drums. The kind of sound that makes your chest vibrate before your ears catch up. That's when I first noticed him. Not the guards marching in formation, those are easy to spot, all scarlet and bearskin. No. I noticed the one who wasn't marching. The one already standing at his post, near the front gate, as still as a statue while the world flowed around him like water around a rock. He was young. Couldn't have been older than 24. But his face was the kind of blank that takes training. Not empty, controlled. Like he'd locked every emotion in a safe and swallowed the key. Leo tugged my sleeve. Why is everyone looking at that one? He was right. People were looking. Not staring, exactly, but glancing. Then, looking away. Then, glancing again. There was something about him. Not his uniform, that was perfect, same as the others. Not his height. It was the way people reacted to him. A mother pulled her child back from the barrier when they got too close to his post. Not because the guard moved. He didn't. But she looked at his face, at the way he held his rifle, and something in her just decided to step back. 2 American tourists walked up, reading from a guidebook. One of them pointed at the guard and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "That's the one who saved that woman last year. The one who broke formation." The other tourist nodded. "Yeah, I read about him. He's famous." And the guard, this young man in the bearskin hat, didn't react. Didn't blink. Didn't smile. But I saw something. Just a flicker. A muscle in his jaw. A slight shift in his weight from one foot to the other. He'd heard them. Of course he had. Everyone knew his name. Everyone knew his story. But, standing there, in that red tunic, with tourists photographing him like he was part of the architecture, I realized something strange. He had no idea how to introduce himself anymore. Because why would you need to, when every person you meet already knows what you did? Let me back up for a second. I didn't know his name then. Nobody in the crowd was saying it. They just called him the guard who broke rank or the one from the video. You've probably seen it. It went viral last summer, one of those shaky phone recordings that ends up on every news site. A woman collapsed near the palace gates. Cardiac arrest, I think. And this guard, instead of staying frozen like he was supposed to, dropped his rifle and ran to her. Started CPR right there on the pavement, in full uniform, while tourists filmed and the other guards kept their posts like nothing was happening. He saved her life. And then, he went back to standing still, like he hadn't just broken every rule in the book. The army gave him a commendation. The newspapers called him a hero. The palace, officially, said nothing because that's what they do. But everyone knew. Everyone remembered. So now, 9 months later, here he was. Back on duty. Back at the gate. Back to being a statue. But the crowd wasn't treating him like a statue. That was the tension I couldn't stop watching. Every few minutes, someone would step closer to the barrier than they should. Not threatening. Just curious. They wanted to see him. Really see him. The way you look at a wild animal that's done something unexpected, half admiration, half fear. A young woman held up her phone and recorded him for a solid 30 seconds. Then, she whispered to her friend, "He's not even looking at us." Her friend laughed. "He's not allowed to look at us." But he could, right? He's not a robot. The guard didn't move. His eyes stayed fixed on some point in the middle distance, the kind of stare that sees everything and nothing at once. But I noticed his hands. White gloves, perfectly clean. They were resting on his rifle, but his fingers weren't relaxed. They were holding. Not gripping. He wasn't nervous. But there was a tension there, a quiet readiness, like a man waiting for a door to open. Leo asked me, "Does he get bored?" I thought about it. I don't think that's the word. What word, then? I watched the guard's chest rise and fall. Slow. Measured. Like he was counting his own breaths. Isolated, I said finally. Because that's what it looked like. Not loneliness, he wasn't alone. There were hundreds of people around him. But isolated. Separated. Held at a distance by his own reputation. No one talked to him like a person. They talked about him. They whispered. They pointed. They took photos. But no one asked his name. No one said, "All right, mate, rough day?" Because you don't say that to a hero. You don't treat a hero like a normal bloke who might have indigestion or a blister on his heel or a text from his mum he hasn't answered. He was a symbol now. And symbols don't get to introduce themselves. That was when the kid RANIT was a boy, maybe 6 or 7. Brown hair, muddy trainers, a red backpack that was half unzipped. He'd been holding his mother's hand near the front of the crowd, but she got distracted, someone asked her for a photo, or she dropped her phone, I didn't see exactly what. All I know is that 1 second the boy was there, and the next he wasn't. He slipped under the barrier. It happened so fast. Kids are like that, they don't think, they just move. The barrier was one of those waist-high metal things on tripod legs, and he ducked right under it like he was sliding into home base. Then, he was on the other side. The wrong side. The side where tourists are not supposed to be. The crowd gasped. A few people shouted. The boy's mother screamed, actually screamed, a raw, sharp sound that cut through the band music and the chatter. The boy didn't seem scared. He just stood there, frozen for a moment, looking around like he'd accidentally walked into a room he wasn't supposed to enter. His bottom lip started to tremble. He was maybe 4 meters from the guard. The guard who had broken rank before. The guard everyone was watching. And here's the thing that made my stomach drop. No one moved. Not the other guards, they were farther down the line, locked in their own stillness, their eyes forward. Not the police officers near the gate, they were turned the other way, dealing with a different part of the crowd. Not the boy's mother, who was frozen with her hand over her mouth. Only the guard. He didn't run this time. He didn't drop his rifle. But he shifted. Just slightly. His chin lowered a fraction of an inch. His eyes, those blank, trained eyes, flicked down to the boy. And then, he did something I didn't expect. He blinked. Not the slow, ceremonial blink of a guard on duty. A real blink. A human blink. The kind you do when you're trying to figure out what to do. For 3 seconds, maybe 4, nothing happened. The band was still playing somewhere in the distance. A pigeon landed on the pavement near the boy's feet. The mother was crying now, saying his name over and over. Jamie. Jamie. Stay still, baby. Stay still. The guard looked at the boy. The boy looked at the guard. And, I swear to you, in that moment, the guard's face did something I'd never seen on a royal guard before. His expression softened. Just a tiny bit. The corners of his mouth, barely. His eyes, just enough that you could see he wasn't looking at a threat. He was looking at a child. Then, he did the thing that made everyone hold their breath. He spoke. Now, you have to understand, royal guards don't talk on duty. That's the rule. They don't speak. They don't move. They don't acknowledge you. It's not rudeness, it's the job. They are there to be walls. Human walls. So when this guard opened his mouth, the crowd went silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of silence where you can hear your own heartbeat. The guard didn't shout. He didn't bark in order. He just looked down at the boy, this tiny, trembling kid in the muddy trainers, and said, very quietly, "You all right there, mate?" His voice was young. That was the first thing I noticed. He sounded like a university student, not a soldier. There was a northern accent in there somewhere. Manchester, maybe. Or Leeds. The boy didn't answer. He just stared up at the bearskin hat, his mouth open. The guard's eyes crinkled. Almost a smile. "That's a big hat, isn't it?" The boy nodded, slowly. "Scares me sometimes too," the guard said. "But, it's just fur and foam. Nothing to be afraid of." He shifted his rifle slightly, not raising it, just moving it to his other shoulder so his right hand was free. Then, he extended his gloved hand toward the boy. "Palm up. Open. Come on," he said. "Let's get you back to your mom before the sergeant sees you. He's grumpier than I am." The boy hesitated. Then, he reached out and took the guard's hand. And that was when the crowd exhaled. A collective sigh, so loud you could hear it. People were crying. The boy's mother was crying. Even Leo, my cynical teenager nephew, wiped his eye with the back of his sleeve. The guard walked the boy to the barrier, slowly, carefully, still holding his hand, and lifted him over like he weighed nothing. The mother grabbed her son and held him so tight I thought she might break him. The guard didn't say anything else. He turned around, walked back to his post, and stood still. Just like that. Like nothing had happened. But something had happened. Because now the crowd wasn't just watching him. They were seeing him. The difference was small, but it was everything. And then, a man near the front, an older bloke with a gray beard and a raincoat, called out, "What's your name, son?" The guard didn't answer. He wasn't supposed to. His face went blank again. The mask came back. But I saw his throat move. He swallowed. Because here was the thing no one understood. Everyone already knew his title. Everyone knew he was the guard who broke rank, the hero of the viral video, the man who saved a stranger's life. But no one knew his name. No one had asked it in months. He was famous, and completely unknown, all at the same time. He opened his mouth to answer the old man. I could see him trying to remember how to do it. How to say, "I'm Private James Cooper," or "I'm Tom from Sheffield," or whatever his real name was. How to introduce himself like a normal person, instead of a monument. But the words didn't come. Because he'd forgotten how introductions feel when everyone already knows your title. So he just stood there. Silent. Still. A hero with no name, in a crowd that had already named him everything except himself. Part 5, the resolution and ending line. Document 5 of 5. The changing of the guard finished about 20 minutes later. The band marched off. The new guards took their positions. The crowd slowly dispersed, melting back into the London streets like the tide going out. The boy, Jamie, left with his mother, both of them still shaking. She kept looking back over her shoulder at the guard, mouthing words he couldn't hear. "Thank you." "Sorry." "Thank you." The guard didn't acknowledge her. He was back in his stance. Stone still. Eyes forward. But I stayed. I don't know why. Leo was hungry, kept tugging my arm toward the Pret-a-Manger on the corner. But I told him to wait. Just 5 more minutes. I watched the guard as the crowd thinned. Watched the way his shoulders dropped, just barely, when the last of the tourists turned away. Watched the way he blinked faster for a few seconds, like he was shaking off a dream. Then, another guard walked over. Older. A sergeant, maybe. He stood next to the young guard and said something too quiet for me to hear. The young guard nodded once. The sergeant clapped him on the shoulder, a brief, firm gesture, and walked away. And, in that small moment, I understood something I hadn't before. The other guards knew his name. Of course they did. They worked with him, ate with him, probably knew what he ordered at the pub and whether he liked his tea with sugar. But, even they treated him differently now. Even they had to remind themselves that he wasn't just the story. He was a bloke who got blisters and had a mum who worried and probably hadn't slept well in months because every time he closed his eyes, he saw that woman's face on the pavement. The young guard stood there for another hour. I know because I waited. Leo complained. I bought him a sandwich. We sat on a bench across the street, and I pretended to read the news on my phone while really just watching. When his shift ended, he walked off toward the guardhouse. No fanfare. No crowd. Just a young man in a big hat, walking with his head down, untying the strap under his chin before he even reached the door. I almost called out to him. Almost said, "Hey. What's your name?" But I didn't. Because I realized it wasn't my place to ask. He'd tell me if he wanted to. And, maybe, someday, when the video stopped trending and the tourists stopped pointing and the story became just another old news article buried in some website's archive, he'd remember how to say it himself.